Candace Caryn, General Manager of Sheridan Honda and Power Sports, and this is I Want to Do That, Women Helping Women Explore the Outdoors. Today, our guest is Caryn Moxey, and we are talking about mountain biking. So, Caryn, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so we're talking about mountain biking, and I obviously know you through our friend group. You
Absolutely.
are also the owner of Pure Energy Fitness, a gym in town that I'm also a member of. So I asked you to be on the podcast because you recently got into competitive mountain biking.
I did.
At the age of
46.
That's incredibly impressive.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience mountain biking. When did you get into mountain biking, and why do you like it?
I have been mountain biking off and on since I was in my teens. And then when I was in my 20s, I lived in Hawaii and I did triathlons.
Fun.
And then I got into off-road triathlons, which is also mountain biking.
Wait. There's an off-road triathlon?
Yes.
I did not know this.
Yep.
So it's like all of the normal events, biking, running, swimming, biking, running, but instead of road biking.
So you mountain bike and you trail run.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's called Xterra. It's super fun.
Wow.
So I did that for a lot of years.
Okay.
And then when we moved back to the mainland and then to Wyoming, triathlons are kind of hard to come by.
Sure.
So I did a few here and there. And then I just started mountain biking with my family and friends.
Yeah.
And my son, who's 16 now, really got into mountain biking because he had some great mentors. And then about 2 years ago, he said he wanted to compete in downhill mountain biking.
Okay.
So I am not the type of person to spectate.
I know. I do know this
Not
about
at all.
you. You're a bit competitive.
Yep.
Okay.
And so all three of us, my husband, my son, and I, are all doing the Northwest Cup downhill mountain bike series this whole summer.
Okay, so hang on a second. So how did you, who taught you how to mountain bike? Did you teach yourself? I mean, obviously you were getting into triathlons and whatnot, and I participated in a couple of triathlon sprints. So I know that there's some training. I mean, there's a lot of training that goes into it, but from a technical component, there's also some technical training that you need to learn in order to compete at that kind of a level. But for mountain biking, did you just kind of teach yourself, or how did you learn?
It's been a combination of a couple things. I mean, I definitely learned just from repetition and practice. And then I've had some great friends that were really incredible mountain bikers over the last really 30 years that have taught me quite a bit. And then I did actually attend two cross-country trail mountain bike women's clinics. One was
these are the ones you've been telling me about to go
that
to.
I want you to go to.
As I'm scared going downhill and you're go to these clinics.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So I did one in Grand Targhee and then one in Big Sky, Montana.
Okay.
Yep.
And the clinics, is it multi-day or one day? And what
usually, I think either a 2 full day or a 2.5 day, over a weekend.
Okay.
And it's just a bunch of women as young as probably in their 20s. They do young girl groups. It's all women though, and all women coaches. The coaches are utter badasses.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's super fun. You get a lot of critique. They videotape you. So it's really based on not just keeping up with the crowd, but really honing your craft over the weekend.
Okay, so so you've done all these activities. Obviously, you're a crazy person. You're always on the go doing something.
I like to move.
Yeah, you like to move. So what is it about mountain biking that you decided, this much later in life? Because obviously you had exposure to it when you were a lot younger, but now here you are in your late 40s and you are I want to compete. What is it about this particular sport that got you excited to say, I want to not only make this investment in equipment, but start competing?
I think it is very important as we age to continue to do things that scare the crap out of you.
No, that's a different perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
And this does. I have constantly told myself I'm not going to put a huge amount of pressure on myself. If I get to a course that is out of my league, then I'll spectate for the weekend. But so far, last weekend we were in Whitefish, Montana, and that was the hardest course we had done yet. And it was scary. I didn't sleep the night before my first practice day. But it was fun because it pushed me beyond my boundaries, my comfort zone for sure. I really want to stay healthy and safe because I have to go back to work usually on Monday.
Yeah, you have a business. I mean, that whole running a business thing is pretty important.
100%.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's fun. The women, the class that I actually compete in is a 40 plus women's beginner category.
Oh, I didn't realize that they had an actual beginner category.
Yes.
Okay,
and it's
that's
awesome.
Cool.
There's usually about 600 to 800 racers every weekend. There's been usually around 10 in my class each time.
Wow.
And they're just other women most of them are in the same boat I am. They have teenage kids that are racing. And they love mountain biking. So.
That's so cool. So let's talk about a little bit more definition around like what mountain biking is. So I learned to quote unquote mountain bike in the Midwest, which
you
was
do just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Which was really just more, I'd say, lighter kind of trail riding. So obviously I understand that mountain biking is meant to be off road, right? So you're not like road biking, but there's cross country biking, there's this enduro biking, there's downhill biking, which I know our friend group is into, and that's kind of where I draw the line. Like, I'm not comfortable with that. So can you kind of help the audience understand what are the different types of mountain biking?
Sure. So there's cross country and trail biking, which is what you can do locally. Okay. The trails that are built around here, red grade trails, Poverty Flats, Hidden Hoot, those are very similar to like a cross country mountain bike race course.
Which is not as going to be as extreme. Like, it's not as technical. It's not as well. I guess red grade is a little bit more elevation. But like Hidden Hoot, we did as a ladies group recently, and that was super fun.
Yep.
It was. I mean, you're still picking up pace and you're still moving, but it's not like the extremes, ups and downs, or a lot of the technical like rock gardens and roots and all that kind of stuff in the trails.
Correct. And as you get into the higher levels of cross country racing, it definitely gets more technical.
Okay.
But yeah, for the most part, it's equal ups and downs, a fair amount of work. You're using a lighter bike with a much larger amount of gears. So there's like a wide range between heavy or hard and easy in your gearing system.
Oh, I didn't know think about it like that, but yes, that's very true. Okay, I like
Next
like
time
that.
you're at my house, I'll show you the backs of
Okay.
And then enduro racing, which is actually super popular, but not something that I've ever done, is where they usually hold it at a ski resort. And then they usually do multiple days and multiple runs, and they're timed on their downhill run, but they actually have to ride their bike to the top of the mountain.
Oh, okay.
But they're not judged on that. But it wears people out. And so
this is more like advanced, like that type of riding would be more advanced.
Yes.
Okay.
But the courses are not usually as intense as the DH or downhill racing.
Okay. So the downhill racing, our crazy friends, I would put you in that category as well.
Yes. Sometimes, not always.
That's a pretty extreme. You're taking a ride, you're getting a ride up one way or another. Yeah. Yep. And then you put a much larger helmet on, like full face, like motorcycle helmet, and you are just racing down the hill. Okay. So obviously I don't do that. I don't participate in that.
Maybe one day.
I want to go with you guys sometime and camp and participate in the fun activities around that. But that's kind of where I draw the line. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's different levels of this, right? Yes. Like you could invest in a less expensive mountain bike and go like in town here to Hidden Hoot. You could go to Red Grade and have a great time. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be like flying down a mountain. Correct. If you're going to quote unquote mountain bike.
Yes.
Okay. So when you got into competing, like what types are you competing where you're racing against other people, or are you competing where you're just racing against time? And are you doing that crazy like full helmet thing, or what type of competing are you doing?
So when I race, I have knee pads, arm pads, and then my husband and son also wear chest protectors. I'm contemplating buying one. I just haven't yet. And then I have a full face helmet and goggles that I wear.
Is all that required to be able to?
Nope, just the helmet.
Oh, just the helmet.
Nope, there's guys out there that are in jean shorts and tank tops.
Okay, I mean, not probably safe, but okay. That's
they're young,
somebody's preference.
Invincible. Okay. And then, so we are racing against a clock. And in some of the more competitive categories, there's usually anywhere from like probably 6 to about 40 in each category, depending on there's Cat 3, Cat 2, Cat 1, and Pro. And so Cat 3 is beginner, and then it works its way down. And some of the teenage course, like the 16 to 20-ish year old classes are usually the most competitive. Okay. Especially as you move up in category, because those are the kids that are trying to become pro.
Sure.
And so a lot of times you'll have the top 1 through 5 people in that category. There might be less than a second difference in the winning time versus fifth place.
But not against each other. They're just going
just one person at a time.
Okay.
So we start at the top, and we get usually a 30-second increment. And so that person takes off, and it goes beep, 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 and then you go. And then you come up behind that person, and then the race director tells you, okay, when you hear beep, 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 you can go after the third beep. Yeah. And then 30 seconds later, it does it.
Just keep going.
And then you go.
And I know you've shared with me that with these women that you're competing with, it's kind of like you're all in the same situation of like, I don't know that I should be doing this or want to be doing this, but I know that I'm here. Yep. And rather than just spectating, I can, participate.
There's a couple of them that are super competitive.
Okay.
They're really nice. Yeah. But they're incredibly great athletes.
And just to be clear, you don't have to compete in mountain biking.
No.
I have never once competed in mountain biking. Although I will say when we went out on the ladies ride, I was pretty proud of myself because I took the first position.
Yes.
Which I have never done
you're
before.
A leader.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I'm a leader. I don't know about that, but I was feeling pretty confident.
Yep.
Most of the time I'm in the back because I like to not have the pressure of somebody being behind me. Even though I probably underestimate my riding skills, I'm just not as confident in that particular sport as I am in other things. Yeah.
Yep,
and I like to just be able to go at my own pace. And I don't like the feeling of knowing that someone's like pressing up against me and do I pull over? Do I do it faster? You know, it gets in my head. So normally I'm in the back, but when we went on our ladies ride, I felt comfortable keeping up. And then at the end of that ride, I actually wanted to, you know, be in the front. But my point is that you don't necessarily have to compete to mountain bike, but it is pretty cool in your situation that you got into competing later on, but you would still be riding if you didn't
100%.
if you didn't compete.
And I still do ride. I have 4 other bikes at home that I ride regularly, so there's no shortage of biking.
Good. So perfect transition. So let's talk about how do we even get into this? I know when I got into it with my friend group in Minnesota, literally I rode a friend's bike a couple of times just to see, hey, is this something that I even want to do?
Correct.
I enjoyed it. So then I went to the bike store in Minnesota with some friends and they kind of helped to guide me in terms of what type of investment to make and, you know, what I should buy. So when we're talking about bikes, like if for listeners that are thinking, you know, I've always wanted to do this, but I don't know where to get started in terms of what to invest in. What type of bike do you have and what do you recommend for people who are looking to get into the sport or maybe to upgrade even to competing?
Absolutely. So I'll think about too, like what is available in Sheridan locally. So we have some local communities that do discovery nights. The Sheridan Community Land Trust does the discovery nights where they'll do beginner, intermediate. We just had an advanced one last week. Where people can come and get a little bit of coaching, maybe hit a trail that they were.
Do they have to bring their own bike or do you guys provide other bikes?
Yep,
okay.
They have to bring in their bikes and helmets are required.
Okay.
But sometimes even just coming and checking it out and seeing kind of what you might be interested in. I think a lot of it is trying to figure out what looks most appealing to do. There's a lot of people that do the Dead Swede gravel race and that's their introduction. Like many of those people have never mountain biked before.
So you're not on the road, you're technically on gravel.
Yes.
And depending on the length of the race that you're doing, you could be climbing a lot or like the 20 mile, I think you're gaining and losing some elevation, but it's not the most intimidating ride like the 100 mile would be at any given point because you are climbing and declining so much in the 100 mile.
Yes. And so I think a lot of it is what's accessible, what is maybe the least intimidating. So does maybe training for the 25 mile or the 20 mile in the Dead Swede or trying to, you know, go hit Hidden Hoot. And then as far as that goes, you know, I'll always recommend our local bike shop, Sheridan Bicycle Company. But even
they're pretty good over there.
They're great. But even just going down there and helping identify, you know, what size tire, what type of frame, what type of bike.
Yes.
Because that can all be super intimidating, especially when you're shopping online.
Yes.
And so having, and sometimes they do consignments. And so having options to maybe get a higher end used bike versus a lower end new bike sometimes is a better option.
And finding like Discovery Night, you can find other like-minded people who bike and then you could borrow potentially their bike just to go out, you know, and I mean, that's again, for me, that's how I knew that I liked it. Just borrowed somebody else's bike, even though I knew it wasn't gonna be the bike for me long term, but and then actually the bike shop that I was at in Minnesota also allowed me the ability to go on, try a couple of different bikes. I didn't go on any sort of like crazy trails, but just to get on and feel it because the frame is important, the type of bike. So hardtail versus full suspension. I only have a hardtail, meaning it's only got one suspension, right? But I think you probably have full suspension for the type of riding that you're doing.
I actually have a hardtail and I have a rigid, a hardtail, and 2 full suspensions.
Okay, so for people that are trying to like get into it,
hardtail probably is a great starting point.
Yes, so you have one suspension in the front,
which keeps the cost down,
but you don't have both the suspensions. Which the drawback is when you're going downhill, you're not going to have as much
cush.
Yes. Okay, you're not going to have as
That's
much
the technical
cush.
term.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing about a hardtail too is that you only have one piece of kind of complicated machinery on that bike. So if you're dealing with a dual suspension bike, sometimes the upkeep and understanding how to maintain it is a little bit more complicated. Whereas just a hardtail with only the front fork is definitely a lot easier.
It's a lot. I know the one time I went on a trip with my bike. Well, I went on a trip with my bike a couple of times, but in Minnesota, I went with a girlfriend for a weekend, and I had a bike situation that I had to have repair, and I was able to do the majority of it. We still had to take it to a bike shop, but I was able to do the majority of it because my hardtail is a lot less complicated and a lot less expensive than the full suspension.
And all bikes, whether they're expensive or inexpensive, they all take maintenance. So.
Yeah, and like even like the seat. I remember last summer we were talking about you had this really perfect seat, and my seat is not perfect and it was not comfortable. And, you know, even something a little bit like investing in a nicer seat, like getting maybe a used bike or a bike that isn't as expensive, but as you ride it more and you enjoy the sport more, investing in upgrading your seat or the cushioning on the handlebars, or, you know, there's little things that you can do to personalize the bike
100%, yes.
for your own, you know, what makes sense for you.
And it just takes practice and using your bike. The more you use it, the more you understand it.
Okay. So going to your local bike shop, talking to your friends, going to things like Discovery Night. What about gear? So we talked a little bit about helmets. I struggle with bike shorts. I have a real challenge. I have a larger seat, and I'm not talking about what's on the tip of my bike. And it's difficult for me to find bike shorts that are long enough and have enough flex in them to move at a comfortable pace. And I still want the padding, you know, in my bike shorts. So
they have to be cute.
And well, of course, I mean, you can't be looking not cute when you're biking. So, so what type of gear? Like, what do you wear? What do you have? What do you have in your pack? Like, what's your preference from a gear perspective?
So I usually have shoes that are just a flat shoe, but they're a biking shoe.
That connect to this to
not for
the pedal.
Not for what I do around here. I just wear flats, but they are a little stiffer. I have a little bit of a Achilles tendon issues, so I can't just wear tennis shoes.
But they do have ones that you can clip into, which are also pretty intimidating. But they also have ones now that are magnets. So they have a magnet on the top of the pedal. They have a magnet on the bottom of your shoe. And when you put that shoe on the pedal, it sticks and it's like you're clipped in. But the good news is you're not.
Yes,
So if you
get out when you want to
take your foot out quickly, you can do that. Or you can just go flat shoed, which is I do the same thing. Okay.
Starting out with, you know, you don't necessarily need great shoes. Even a pair of tennis shoes or hiking shoes are fine. And then usually, you know, if I'm pedaling a lot, I'll wear shorts. When I race DH, I usually wear pants just because it keeps my skin on my body.
Okay.
Which is always a nice plus.
Smart, yeah. Good place for it.
And then, you know, t-shirts, jerseys. I like gloves because I have a tendency towards sweaty palms.
Same. Yeah. I really prefer. And I feel like the gloves, the padded ones too, kind of help with the pressure that you put onto your handlebars. It just, for me, I don't know if it's like a placebo effect or if it's real, but I really feel like it helps that pressure on my hands.
Yeah, for sure. And I think certain people have a tendency, you know, to hand problems or not. So it just kind of depends on your body and your handlebars, your grips, that kind of thing. And then honestly, I think the one thing I can't live without is a decent pair of sunglasses because I have to wear clear lens sunglasses.
Same. That's why we have the same ones. I forgot. Yes.
But yeah, so because the tinted sunglasses for me when I'm going in and out of shadows is
hard,
really challenging.
Same.
But then also if you're behind somebody and it's dusty or you're going fast, your eyes are streaming tears, and then you can't see.
And there's rocks and dirt that will kick up. So you legitimately should be wearing sunglasses to protect your eyes.
So sunglasses are probably like the one thing I can't live without.
Okay. And I also love too, when I first got into mountain biking, all of the shirts and like the tank tops often have the little zipper pockets so that you can put your stuff on your body close to you. So if you're riding and you still need to grab something, you have access to it. I can't bike without my fanny pack. And I know that sounds really funny, but I love my fanny pack.
Yes.
I mean, I love a good fanny pack, generally speaking. But when I'm biking, that's like, I have to have it. Like, I feel like I can't.
Well, and it's nice because you can put, you know, a tube for your tire if you get a flat, extra tools, snacks, my phone, that kind of thing.
Yes.
My family makes fun of my fanny pack, but they're always asking me, hey, can you stick
this
in there
Then
for
they
me?
want things to be put in the fanny pack, of course. Yes. Okay. So we've talked about a little bit about, you know, what types of bikes to look for and what kind of communities to get involved in. So what advice do you have? Like if you were to take a beginner out with you, what would you make sure that they have or that they're prepared for? Let's just say it's someone who's in your circle of friends that has never rode before and, you know, says, hey, Caryn, I really want to try this out. I'm intimidated because mountain biking definitely can seem very intimidating. And I personally am intimidated by a lot of components of my mountain biking, which is why I know my limitations and I know what I like.
Me too.
And I know what type of technical ground I'm comfortable on and what I'm not. And so, I arrived at that level. But if you had a beginner that you were taking out, what would you make sure that they were prepared for on that first ride?
I think a lot of times, often I'm going to look at their bike when they pull it out of their car and make sure that their tires are at the proper inflation, because too much is not fun. Too little is not fun.
Okay. So let's talk about that, because I am notorious for just taking my bike out and I just go. So, the tire pressure can be found on the tire, right? The recommendation.
And usually that's way higher than you actually want to go.
Okay. Because the higher the tire pressure, the faster, the harder that bike's going to roll, the faster it's going to go. So by letting out some air, you're actually able to in theory, control that bike.
And create a little more suspension, because it's a little more cush.
A little more cush.
Yeah.
That cush. Okay. The technical cush. Okay. So you're going to check their tire pressure, which means you need to have a bike pump and a tire pressure gauge, right, with you.
Yep. It's nice to have a bike pump. Most of the bike pumps have gauges on there. And a lot of times I kind of know each tire on each of my bikes. And so I just know by feel, kind of a...
Sure.
And, I know my mountain bike with my slightly bigger tires. It's like a ripe peach.
Sure.
When my gravel...
describe it. I like it.
My gravel bike is a little bit more like a well-cooked pizza crust. That's kind of...
ripe peach versus well-cooked pizza crust.
Everything has to do with
food.
food.
That. Okay.
Yeah. So making sure that, they're... has their chain been lubed? Or is their bike in generally decent maintenance? And if not, is there anything that I can do before we ever get on the trail?
Okay.
And then as soon as they jump on, are they fitting on their bike properly? Is their seat post in the right position? Because a lot of times you'll see people that have too much too much pressure in their tires, or their seat post is too high or too low, and they're miserable.
That has happened to me with all of it. It's happened to me with having too much tire pressure, and I felt completely out of control.
Yes.
It's happened to me where I was extending my legs too much. My seat was too high. And then it also happened to me most recently that the bike shop fixed, where I was out too far in front and I was leaning over. And so on shorter rides, I didn't notice it as much. But when I started to go on longer rides, I was like, I hate this. Like, I'm not comfortable. I don't like this. My back hurts. My shoulders hurt. And then I start to, question myself, and I lose my confidence in the way that I'm riding. And all I want to do is get off the bike.
Right.
And then someone said, hey, you're leaning too far out. Like, you're not properly fit for your bike.
Correct.
Your bike's not properly fit for you, I guess is really what it should be. And a few minor changes, and it was a game changer in terms of how comfortable I felt on the bike.
Your bike's like a pair of shoes. If you're going to hike 10 miles in a pair of shoes, they better fit well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so you're going to check those things. And then once they get on the trail, like I know you've coached me, what are some of the things that you would coach a beginner on as they're riding on, first the dirt, then the gravel, and then maybe, we're actually maybe we're going through like a rock garden, or there's some roots in the ground, or we've got a little bit of elevation that we're either climbing or we're declining on. Like what type of advice would you give for people who are doing that?
The first one is always breathe.
Breathe.
Yes. It's very important
to remember. Breathe.
But just slowing down. I think when people get into a situation that they're not comfortable with, they have a tendency to get tight and nervous and feeling rushed. And so it's just breathe and just know that you want to be able to take your time. I've coached women out at Hidden Hoot in those berms with the turns that were constantly, slamming on the brakes and going over their handlebars in the steep turns. And so what it wasn't a matter of skill or knowledge. It was that they were going too fast and they were braking too late.
Okay.
So if I could get them to go into those turns slower, they get to the bottom and they're,
this is more fun.
This
is not terrifying. It's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I think just not trying to rush, not trying to go too fast, too soon. Don't ever measure yourself to anybody else for sure, because it's supposed to be fun.
Yes.
The whole point.
Yes. And I've had to remind myself of that as well.
Me too.
So what other resources would you recommend that people can turn to? Like maybe they've tried it a couple times, they want to get better, or they're still like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, what other resources besides one that you've already shared would you recommend that people can look into to get ready to participate in this, or maybe to take it up a level in terms of their riding ability?
So like for DH, even at a lot of these ski resorts, they do have rental bikes, and they have rental bikes that you can take on the cross-country trails.
Oh, nice.
Big Sky has a huge rental fleet, and it's pretty affordable. For a half day, you can go out and ride a bike for a couple hours, maybe get on a bike that you wouldn't be able to normally try.
Like more expensive, like a full, like if I'm on a hardtail now and I want to try a full suspension to see if that's like what really, I guess I've never actually ridden your guys' full suspension. So I know that, I know cost-wise they're a lot nicer and they look cool.
It's going to ruin you.
Yeah, exactly. I've never, and my mountain bike has much thicker wheels because I was thinking that I could try to get away with using that for fat tire biking as well. So they're not technically fat tire size, but I had a friend recently come over to my house and he was like, "Oh, you have 2 fat tires." I'm like, "No, one is a mountain bike.
One's fat and one's plus."
Exactly. That's a really good. I should have described it that way. Yeah, because my mountain bike is plus. But I just emotionally, I feel better with that size of tire. I think it probably slows me down a bit, but I don't know. Like I just like that fatter tire. Now maybe I'll get to a point at some point in my career in mountain biking where I want to go to a smaller tire and I can pick up some of that pace. But where I'm at right now, that that fatter one, the fatter one works. Okay, so trying on other bikes. What other recommendations do you have?
I also think that nicer bikes or more suspension doesn't necessarily mean more advanced. I rode a hardtail for a long time when my son was younger, and we weren't quite ready to invest in new bikes yet.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't need a dual suspension bike or full suspension. I don't need a fancy bike. I'm not good enough to ride a fancy bike.
Sure.
Then I got on the fancy bike and realized the reason why it's fancy is because it's really fun.
Okay. And you felt comfortable on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think, buy what you can invest in, buy what you can afford, and don't be intimidated by, if it's fancy. Fancy means fun. And if you can't afford a super expensive bike, using resources like the bike shop or friends that know bikes to make sure that you're getting into the right bike. We have a friend right now that has a little bit of a limited budget that's looking into more of a DH bike.
Sure.
And he asked us the other day, he said, should I get a new bike with not as good components, and we said, no, absolutely get maybe a 3 or 4 year old
used bike. Yeah.
Your money's going to go a lot farther. And that was just something that he didn't know. So, I think.
So looking on like Facebook, looking on,
Pink Bike is a good one.
Oh, Pink Bike.
Pink Bike. But it's always a little bit, you're buying something large in the mail and you don't know the person you're buying it from.
Sure.
So you do have to be careful with that.
So going to your local bike store, obviously we've got a great one here, but other places as well. Just go to your local bike store, let them know kind of what you're looking for. Chances are they may even have one on consignment or they might have a used one there. And if they don't, they're seeing all of the people in town that have all the bikes, and people are always looking to upgrade and trade out. So that's another option too.
Casper, Billings, Spearfish, and Bozeman all have huge cycling communities.
Okay.
So a lot of times if you get on there's a lot of Facebook pages for those areas.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you can find a used bike and actually go, test drive it before you buy it, which is great.
So last question.
Yes.
So you, again, got into competing and you are kind of turning over a new leaf in terms of this particular hobby. I know you have quite a few hobbies, but this particular hobby, I know I was just unbelievably impressed when I heard that you decided to compete. And first I was like, oh my gosh, like how did she get ready for that? How is she training? Because I know you, and I know that like you don't do something halfway. Like you when you do something, you commit to it. But it was just so cool to hear the story about, I'm here with my son. I'm here with my husband. My son's obviously competing at a pretty high level. He's young. He's getting into this. My husband was like, why the heck not? I might as well do this too. And I think he had done it. Had he competed in the past?
We were all brand new.
So you guys are all just deciding as a family to get in the competition. But so what advice do you have for women that are listening and have thought to themselves, I really want to try that. I really want to do that. But I don't know, like I'm nervous, and what if I crash, and what if I fall, or what if I don't know what I'm doing, or like maybe the biking community seems a little intimidating to get into, and like those people they look the part, and I don't look the part. So like what advice do you have for those women that just need to get over that hump or want to get over that hump but don't know how?
I think take it one step at a time, but don't be afraid to put yourself out there, whether it's attending a spin class, attending a group ride, talking to people that that ride and finding things that are going to be suitable for you as far as beginner rides or even intermediate rides. I meet so many men and women that want to ride more, but then we have a group ride and they're intimidated and they don't come, and it's actually the perfect situation.
Just because they feel like they're going to be the worst rider or whatever, which I get it. Because like I said, I like to be in the back. Like everyone's like, well, come on up in the front. Like, no. I am the most comfortable in the back where I can just be. And if something happens, it happens. Because chances are you're going to fall. Like you're going to probably come off your bike, and it's okay. Like
Sometimes it's actually really good for you mentally.
To just get over, just to have it happen. Yep. I actually, it happened to me on like, I think my third ride. And you're right. Like I was like the anticipation of it happening was way more intimidating than it happened. It obviously wasn't necessarily super pleasant, but it wasn't the end of the world either.
Right.
You know,
you didn't die.
You didn't die. Got a couple scraps or a couple scratches and some scrapes and get up and you dust yourself off and you get back on. And you do have this like, almost this like feeling of confidence after it happens because 100%. It just happened, you know, it just happened. But again, depending on your comfort level with risk, obviously I'm not doing as much risky stuff as you're doing. So if I were to take a tumble, it's probably not going to be as significant of a tumble as if you were to take the tumble when you're going downhill. But at the end of the day, like that's what gets you excited and that's what you love. And I honestly, I think I like more of the uphill than I do the downhill, which is crazy because I've gotten into spin pretty significantly in the last few years, ever since COVID. And I love spin classes and now I love climbing. Whereas prior to spin classes, when I did mountain biking, I hated climbing. And now I'm like, okay, I love the uphill. The downhill, yeah, it's great. You can take a little bit of a break, but I'm way more intimidated by the downhill than I am the uphill.
And it's both are just skills. The more you do it, the more comfortable you become.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is don't be scared.
Just ride more.
Just ride more. Get out there and find your community and give it a try. And you never know. Maybe you'll pick up competitive racing.
Who knows? Yes.
In your late 40s.
Sometimes I think I'm a little crazy, but I'm having fun.
Okay, well that's...
And my son thinks I'm cool, I think. So that's
well,
good.
You know what? The fact that you guys are doing it in a family is also really
fun.
Cool. And I'm sure that there are clearly other women out there that are experiencing the same thing. So
yeah, for sure.
Kudos to you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
When's your next race?
August 4th in Kellogg, Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck. I can't wait to hear about it.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.